Good morning. Most of the people that appear in front of me are standing, and they're not very happy about it. It's Promotion Sunday. It's also Constitution Day. Today, September the 17th, is set aside annually to commemorate the formation and signing of the world's foremost government document, the United States Constitution. We the people, you've seen that written in big letters in the Constitution. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Wow, what an opening. The end of the Constitution contains these words: done in convention by the unanimous consent of the states present this 17th day of September in the year of our Lord, 1787, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 12th, in witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names, signed George Washington, President and Deputy from Virginia. 39 men signed the Constitution. 4 others are very quickly recognizable: Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, easily the founding fathers of our country. Interestingly, that concluding paragraph refers to the unanimous consent of the states present. No one from Rhode Island signed the Constitution. In fact, that state refused to even send a single delegate to the Philadelphia Convention. Ratification conventions or state legislatures were needed to ratify this brand new Constitution. 9 of the 13 states were needed. Rhode Island holds another singular distinction. In 1790, Rhode Island finally voted to ratify the Constitution, the last of the 13. Indeed, our federal government had already opened for business a year earlier on April 1, 1789, by the time Rhode Island signed off. The first Congress had already voted to introduce 12 proposed amendments by James Madison. Rhode Island's distrust of a powerful federal government was already showing. Rhode Island's delegates to its ratification convention approved it by a vote of 34 to 32 on May 29, 1790. Not exactly unanimous, was it? A bit of a division. New Hampshire holds the historic distinction of being the deciding state, ratifying it as the 9th state on June 21, 1788. So why was Rhode Island the holdout? 11 attempts were made to hold a ratifying constitutional convention. They failed. There were several unsuccessful attempts to let the people decide on their own by referendums. The distrust of a centralized concentration of power in a federal government was active, it was alive, and it was kicking. So why did Rhode Island finally come around by a 2-vote margin? They acted only after several neighboring states threatened to tax Rhode Island's exports as though it were a foreign country. Imagine that. Rhode Island's anti-federalist stance earned it the nickname Rogue Island. Nonetheless, Rhode Island joined, finally, the great American family. Our federal Constitution has been amended 27 times, including one amendment that repealed a previous amendment, prohibition. The first 10 amendments comprise what we call our Bill of Rights, enacted and ratified to protect the people against the acts of a powerful, centralized federal government. It confers individual rights of people against the government. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Our cherished First Amendment was actually the third amendment in the package of 12 offered in 1789 by James Madison. The very first one that was proposed cannot be ratified now because we now have far too many people in the United States, and it had to do with Congress's representation by population. The second proposed amendment in 1789 was actually ratified by the state of Michigan in 1992, making it the 27th amendment, 203 years after it was proposed. This amendment forbids pay raises for members of Congress from taking effect until an intervening election by the members of Congress. Only 6 states ratified that rather sensible-sounding amendment. In the 19th century, one more state ratified it. By 1982, still unratified, it became the subject of a research paper by a fellow named George Watson, a sophomore at the University of Texas in Austin. He argued there was no time limit for ratification of this proposed constitutional amendment. Had he gotten an A on the paper, this amendment may never have made it into law. He got a C. He appealed the C to his teaching assistant, to the professor, to the dean, and he got no merit. Clearly, George Watson was not happy. He sent letters to the remaining states who mostly ignored the idea. Maine, however, started the ball rolling in 1982. Amazingly, it made it. 1992, 203 years later. Stunning, but true. Now, constitutions generally share a number of common characteristics. These are debated by political scientists all over everywhere. Nobody has the same precise opinion. The first thing it provides are rules and guidelines for governance. The second, it defines the relationship between key institutions and the people governed. Third, constitutions provide a location for sovereignty. Fourth, it provides ways for amendment. Fifth, it provides a statement of rights. And sixth, it generally provides what a nation or an organization stands for. Now for the segue to the Sermon on the Mount. These common characteristics are found in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5, 6, and 7 in the Gospel of Matthew. Relax, I'm not going over all 3 chapters. For instance, rules and guidelines for personal Christian behavior. The Sermon on the Mount defines the relationship between God and His church. God is clearly the sovereign. No amendments are allowed. the Sermon on the Mount provides a statement of personal responsibilities that apply equally to all of us. And finally, the Sermon on the Mount provides what God's church stands for on earth. Perhaps we can think of the Sermon on the Mount as the flip side of the coin describing our Constitution. The 8 blessings of the Beatitude serve as a set of individual behaviors, reminders of how to be, how to act with the proper attitudes. The meek, the merciful, the pure of heart, and the peacemakers are unique to Matthew. The other 4 blessings or beatitudes are replicated in the Sermon on the Plain in the Gospel of Luke. The Sermon on the Mount in Matthew establishes a system of self-governance, of guidance in making constant, personal choices throughout the entirety of our lifetimes. It is a set of directives for living in peace with God, for living in peace in our personal relationships with each other. Jesus' new covenant is written on our hearts. Our hearts form the foundation of our Christian conduct. We get along with many people. Others, well, maybe not so much. Peace, personal reconciliation, reconciliation with others, continue to remain an elusive goal. Nothing much has changed since the Sermon on the Mount. Perhaps it is easier to be reconciled to God than it is to each other. Reconciliation with others, however, is a prerequisite to reconciliation with God. We each have our adversaries, our enemies. We harbor anger in our hearts. You've heard this before. Turn the other cheek. Don't go 1 mile, go 2. Seek peace in our personal relationships. You have heard it said, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy." But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. I don't know about you, but that is one of the most difficult parts of any part of the Bible to comply with. Love your enemies. Yikes. Tough to do. And I do feel certain that we are all in full compliance with those new directives, especially that one, right? Well, maybe not. This is decidedly difficult for us. Doing merely enough, the bare minimum, is not enough. We must do more. The Sermon on the Mount establishes a new structure for faithful behavior for God's church and for us as individuals. It is written on the hearts of every person of Christian faith. It is written on your hearts. It is written on mine. The Sermon on the Mount, and go back and read it. I'm not going over those 3 chapters in the next 30 seconds. It does form a sort of new constitution for people of faith. It is complete with rights, with responsibilities, and with relationships prescribed by Jesus Christ. So how are we doing? How are you doing? How am I doing? So today, we ask ourselves and conclude with this single question. Are we constitutional today? Or are we unconstitutional because we failed to comply with the directives contained in the Christian Constitution, the Sermon on the Mount?